in Action. This session will be a case study looking at our work with Johnson County government. Johnson County is in Kansas, and we'll learn a little bit more about it. Someone who is not with me, who I wish he would have been Brett Williamson. He's the program analyst with Johnson County, and so is the one who manages this website, and we're fortunate to get to work with him, so I'll be sharing a lot about his experience and some quotes from him and just what it's been like to do a great job of building a system that ends up being used and gets a little bigger and more valuable, which is kind of the goal of what probably everybody in the room wants to have happen. You build a thing that people use and get a lot out of. So I'm Jenna Dillette. I'm CEO and owner at Square. You can find me on LinkedIn. I like to describe myself as someone who likes people, and I happen to work with software. So everything I do, and hopefully you see from this session today, is really motivated by the impact of what technology does. We'll spend less time on the technical of how we got there. I trust your skills in the room to kind of piece that together or follow up with me if you have questions. But a key focus will be on why does all of this matter? What are we doing with tools? What are we trying to achieve in the communities that we're all individually working in? My company is Square. Our mission is helping others help others. We provide the full range of suites focused on open source development, doing most work in Drupal and CiviCRM. And so we end up being kind of self-selecting because we've worked in CiviCRM since 2008. That's how many organizations find us. And most of the systems with CiviCRM we support are Drupal systems, since there's a unique hand in glove. We also provide ongoing hosting and security and maintenance. There's not a lot of Drupal shops that necessarily do both, and so that means that we care deeply about the long-term performance of systems, and I have a note about our outbound mailing capabilities. For a long time, we actually maintained our own mail server, and so know a lot about what it takes to get an email into somebody's inbox. And so the way that all pieces together to give great support for no matter what the need is: visual design, back-end infrastructure, optimization, communication delivery, the full suite. So let's meet Johnson County, Kansas, which is part of why you're here today. They have a population of 609,000. They're the largest county in the state of Kansas. You see them right there on the border with Missouri, sort of the largest suburbs in the Kansas City metro area. And a little brief detour into Kansas history. If you don't know about Kansas history, this part of Kansas, the Northeast Quadrant, had a big role in how it got to be called Bleeding Kansas, and cut to the chase, cut to the end of the story. Kansas was admitted into the Union as a free state. There's great Free State Brewery in Lawrence, Kansas. There's great history in that part of the state, and specifically within the geographic region of Johnson County. So this would be an entirely other session at a history conference, which we're not at, but needed to throw in the slide with a little bit of Kansas history. The website we'll be looking at today is connect.jocogov.org, and it's a website that is relatively simple. It has a bunch of public classes open for registration. There's various forms for licensing renewals and communication management for a growing number of departments. And so there's management of childcare licensing, the delivery of mental health care services, family education programming, and corrections volunteer management. And it all started with childcare licensing. So a little bit about Brett, who I mentioned earlier, who is the maintainer of the website and who we work with within Johnson County. He had been managing and working in Drupal for about 6 years, and the Johnson County Department of Health and Environment's Child Care Licensing Division needed a new solution. They had a bunch of events. They had regular programming classes and license renewal for any kind of local, organization that wanted to offer child care services. You have to be licensed through the county. And so there's a lot of things that go into that, and they needed a better system to streamline that. Because of all of his experience with Drupal, and because the county had just transitioned their main websites to a different host, that whatever that host set up made it just a little more restrictive for what they could do and manage within those sites. He took all of that Drupal experience and spun up a internally hosted Drupal site specifically for the purpose of childcare licensing management. So just that one specific function that the county provides. And then with the need for event registration and promotion, he started looking around and said, there's got to be something for how this can be done in Drupal, which is probably a question that everybody finds themselves asking, like, there's got to be a thing. There's so many tools available. And that's how we came across CiviCRM. And these are links to a variety of CiviCRM Drupal-related modules that are really powerful that we'll talk about a little bit more. The ability to integrate your CiviCRM contact data directly with Drupal, kind of hand in glove. It's a CRM, it's got its own database, it's separate from your CMS, but the way that they fit together and what that opens up. And for Brett, what that meant is that he could in some ways kind of bypass the procurement process because it was really a module that he could just install on his website that happens to be super duper powerful and configurable and meet a whole bunch of needs that have just expanded what a relatively simple website is now managing for multiple departments. So we'll take a quick little look into CiviCRM itself. So the project's been around for 20 years. This year is the 20th anniversary of the project, so it's an established open source project. It was built around and has always been targeted more towards the needs of social good organizations, nonprofits, government entities. So the functionality that it brings to the table, contact management, of course, contributions, so all things money, event management, membership, email marketing, reporting, having accounting integrations with multiple different external accounting systems, robust case management capabilities, all of your advocacy campaigns of relating events and memberships and emails and all of that to unified campaigns, and it's incredibly configurable and customizable. So this previous slide shows several Drupal modules that are especially powerful. So there's one called WebForm CiviCRM. So that takes the WebForm module and then builds on top of that. And so you can create and update contact records in your CiviCRM instance through WebForm submissions. And so there's a kind of a configuration setting where you select the fields in CiviCRM that you want to enable for your web form, and then you have all of that functionality that web form brings to the table with conditional logic and validation rules and different field types in order to have a really robust, beautiful web form that matches the theme and work that you've done on your website, but it happens to, upon submission, update your contact data. That also works for event registrations. Payment processing also works through web forms, membership signups, adding people to groups, removing people from groups, creating relationships. So all the things that are more of a traditional CRM function, those can be managed through web forms. The other really powerful, there's a bunch of modules, but the other really powerful module specifically related to that deep integration that's possible between Drupal and CiviCRM is CiviCRM Entity. That's a module that we at Square maintain, and so what that does is open up all contact data in CiviCRM as a true Drupal entity. So anything that you can do with a Drupal entity, that makes all of your contact data available. So that opens up a whole suite of a ton of Drupal modules that then you can use and leverage and do customizations and configuration and site building, but with your contact data. And so this is what Brett found. He found CiviCRM. He found that that met his need related to child care licensing. And then from there, it's just grown as more departments have come in, and he's been able to solve their problems with a unique section of what the CRM brings to the table. The quick note, about 50% of all CiviCRM installations are with Drupal. It also works, CiviCRM also works as a standalone CRM platform and can be integrated with WordPress, Joomla, and Backdrop. And so the deepest and longest and still most robust integration is with Drupal. So how do they specifically use it? There's a lot more features that I mentioned of what CiviCRM brings to the table. Like any organization, it's typically going to be a handful. It's not the full functionality that any one organization is going to use. For their purposes, they do a lot with the contact relationship management, so ability to have one-to-one, one-to-many relationships between individuals and organizations. They use it for event management, both for free event promotion and paid event registration, such as licensing classes, parenting classes. They use it for bulk mailings and communications. This has actually just started within the last month, where that functionality has always existed, but they were using an external system, and so now all of that is managed out of CiviCRM as well. And then they also use it for funds, so receiving in registration fees, things like that, and some customizations that they have there related to their particular payment processor. And as you probably can all appreciate, the importance that these funds go to this department and these funds go to this department, but you want to have a clean, unified experience for the end user on your website. So let's take a look at the system. If you go to connect.jocogov.org, it's a super simple website, which it's a privilege to speak in a room when I know there's a lot of AI sessions happening right now. And what this session is about is actually a relatively simple use case and the power of taking advantage of what good tools bring to the table and doing smart site building to meet the specific needs that you have within your location. And so when setting up CiviCRM for their use case, they needed to just configure the different contact types and relationships that need to exist between, say, a child care provider and the primary contacts within the county that are managing those relationships, who are the point people, being able to track and see that over time. So that's configuring your contact types. Also the event types, so you can have a filterable calendar that is based on different events. And you can have specific landing pages that are basically views that are just showing events of a particular type, but it's all managed within one infrastructure in the back end. And then creating all the custom fields. I always think like favorite color, which no one ever has in their CRM, or your meal preference for event. I want vegan at one and I want the meatloaf at the next, right? Those are independent data points that need to live on my participant record, not my contact record, because it would get overwritten all the time. So that data structure and logic of where and how you put your information, that directly impacts your ability to get meaningful reports out of the system. And then profiles, which in CiviCRM language is basically the collection of fields that you then use on various forms for collecting signups, collecting money, what is required and optional, and that submission process. So this is a quick little screenshot from CiviCRM, custom data fields. You can see in the third column over, you determine what it's used for. And so in this case, the first one is a set called volunteer information. There's multiple fields within that custom data field set, and that's used for individuals versus, say, fourth or fifth one down called healthy life classes, which is a custom data field set, is relevant to participants. Individuals can be participants at multiple events, so there's going to be a distinct participant record at every single event versus just one individual contact record, which goes back to that example about meal preference, right? You have it on the participant record, not the contact record. So that's the beauty of being able to create multiple subtypes for individuals. So let's say you have a student, or an intern, or a sponsor. Sponsor could be a subtype to organization. Maybe you want custom data fields that are unique for sponsors that are not relevant to all of your organizations. So kind of classic, data structure, thinking about the logic. There's a lot of similar things related to how a Drupal site is built, and the fact that all of this kind of lives together with the system, its own database, its own software, but the fact that they're integrated really opens up the doors for what's possible with site building and functional implementation. I mentioned profiles. This is sort of the CiviCRM version of a collection of fields that's used for a variety of things. This is also a way to build a light directory of the fields that you want to have available, and then the ability for that to even be visible on the front end to kind of see a listing of registrants at an upcoming event. That also can be achieved with greater flexibility and control with a Drupal view, which we'll talk about. Money's important. This is a fun little screenshot because as their use of the system has grown, boy, look what happened, 23 to 24. The system is processing a lot more money than it used to because more departments have come on. It's grown in adoption for the number of things that it manages and the ability to have just really valuable and frankly simple reports that get the departments everything that they need out of the system to track engagement and use. I mentioned they have a customization in place related to designation. So that money ends up in the right pot And that's just a little custom upon submission that it's sent over to their payment processor and then pings back so that contribution is accurately recorded as completed in CiviCRM, so there can be full reporting available. Event management is the key feature that Johnson County uses out of CiviCRM. So a bunch of different event types. This is a Drupal view that's just pulling in all of the events from CiviCRM. They've chosen to have all of their CiviCRM events display as Drupal pages, which is something that is brought to the table. That really opens up the doors for how you want that information to display. So you're not at all limited by kind of what CiviCRM comes out of the box with for an event display. You can have that look however you want. And the whole point for an end user is that they shouldn't ever have to care or know about what software or system they're in, right? You're just providing an experience, give them the information, no additional thoughts required. I mentioned earlier about the different event types, just a simple screenshot of all the different kinds of event types that they have available, filterable off their kind of master upcoming events, and then individual landing pages that promote them individually. In the back end, this is a match of then all the events they actually have, and the Drupal display of that. They're really simple. In this case, is a family child care home orientation meeting on Zoom. There's not a lot that needs to be said on this. You just register, there's a start and end date. It's a simple event, but the information display can be controlled by their team on the Drupal side, even though the data itself lives within CiviCRM. This is a screenshot of the CiviCRM event configuration, the fields that you'd expect, what's the title, the start, the end, the summary, your WYSIWYG editor for the complete description with the links. There's also a Zoom integration available within CiviCRM, so there can be registrations in Zoom if that's how you manage or have a lot of virtual meetings, and then the ability to have that all display on the front end. From there, you can control if it's a free or paid event. You can set up multiple payment processors, and it's not that difficult to set up customizations with additional payment processors that may not have the same wide support within CiviCRM because of whatever you have set up within your agency. Price sets are really powerful of having fields expire at a certain date, such as register by this date, it's this fee, register after, it's this other fee. So price sets and the rules that can apply to that, or just entering out your fields of the value and how much it is, and more simple. So there's lots of options within that. And then your control of what the online registration process looks like. So the ability to control when it starts and ends, and what's the messaging, what's the duplicate matching rule that's used for the event registration process, the ability to control which rule is used. So you can have a more strict rule for certain kinds of events, and maybe a different rule for another type of events because of who it's targeted to. This is a lot of settings to go through when creating events. So what a lot of organizations will do, where they will create templates for their primary types of events. So they always start from an event template, and then they know they just have to go and change 3 or 4 fields, press publish, and it's displaying on the front end of their website. So anytime you see a bunch of fields, there's ways to work around that and not have to enter in that information every single time. Because you all have other things that you want to do during the day. This is the shot of the view of what it looks like to decide what information you need to collect upon registration. You select from a variety of profiles that have been set up in your system that say first name, last name, email, and favorite color, and you're registered. So what are those fields? Which ones are required? Is there different fields collected if someone is registering for more than themselves? So maybe they're registering for themselves and their colleagues, or themselves and their family. There can be different fields required depending on that type of registrant, and all of that's configurable within CiviCRM, no code required. And this is about repeating. So especially for the purposes of their childcare licensing and some of their family programming, a lot of those are series of events or are repeating monthly events, and so the ability to set up one event but have it repeating and complete control on the duration and timing of how often those repeat in the last date. And so again, kind of doing your work in advance to set it up in the future. So going back to this event shop, the simple screen of upcoming events. It's a Drupal view using the CiviCRM entity module. So you see there's a bunch of fields over on the bottom left-hand side that all have kind of CiviCRM in the title. So you see it's pulling in the event start date, the end date, the description, There can be filters, all kinds of stuff. If you know Drupal views, it's a Drupal view, except you're actually pulling in and manipulating your CRM data, which flies the doors open of what's possible. Here's a bunch of other views, screenshots, that kind of further communicate the purpose and how you can duplicate and have the same information but displayed with a slightly different filter or slightly different information and displayed all across the website. This is a quick recap of the CityCRM Entity Drupal module, since it's really the key thing for why I wanted to present about this at Drupal GovCon, because it is so powerful, and this is a conference full of a bunch of Drupal developers or Drupal site builders. And so the fact that there's a CRM system that can be easily installed with your existing Drupal site, that in some ways you can bypass procurement even to have certain needs met, that brings a lot of functionality to the table, that maybe it's possible within Drupal, but Drupal is a content management system, not a contact management system. And so the fact that they can live together in the site building capabilities that you have still to do everything Drupal style is really powerful, and it's the CityCRM Entity Drupal module that provides that functionality. There's also robust user roles and permissions. And so a lot of the permissions into CityCRM data are controlled on the Drupal side of, can you administer CityCRM? That would mean, can you create custom fields and permission controls and profiles and all kinds of things like that. Can you update data? Can you view data? A lot of those kind of core permissions are held on the Drupal side for what users can do. There's some great modules that, for say, a member role sync, so you have an association or you have a member login area, and based on the, do they have a new, pending, grace, expired membership type, a member role sync module takes that membership status in CityCRM and then automatically updates that member role in Drupal from either, say, current, if that's your member role, or just authenticated, so they can still log in, but they no longer have access to see and do anything. So we have all of the interactions and activity that individuals are doing that lives where it should, which is in a CRM, but that directly intersects within what can be done and seen within Drupal. There's a lot of additional access control rules within CityCRM, and so perhaps you want to limit within your organization which departments can see financial data, or maybe which departments can see financial data, they can't update financial data. So all of that can be controlled in a more granular way within CityCRM itself by creating access control groups and then adding the permissions of the functions that they can see within the system. This is a screenshot of a contact record. This is my contact record in the system. Didn't take the time to fill out all the fields, but you can have multiple addresses, you can share addresses between contacts. So if my business address is my employer's address, if that address gets updated on that contact record, it'll automatically apply to mine, which is useful if I'm sending a mail merge out of CityCRM and I want to pull in that specific address type, then that should always be up to date. So if you're keeping your contact information up to date in the correct spot and you have your architecture set up correctly, that'll trickle out across the system. There's great deduplication matching rules and functions, just like we all have to do our dishes and laundry. That's also the same thing with CRM management and content management of cleaning up, reviewing, building your system now for future team members who may not be even part of your team, but how can you have a sustainable performance system? So it's got all the classic fields you see on the very top: search, contacts, contributions, events, mailings, campaigns, reports, and then that mirrors down along the left-hand side on each contact record. Think of it as a hub and spoke. So contacts are in the middle. Contacts do things with organizations. They sign up for events, they have memberships, they participate in campaigns, they open emails. And so some CRM systems are really focused on donors, or they're really geared towards membership, or they're more about campaign and email management. What I say about CityCRM is that it is It can do all of the things, which doesn't mean it is the best at any one thing, but the thing that it brings to the table is the fact that it's got that full suite of functionality. And then with Drupal, the way you can leverage Drupal modules and site building and customization to bring that further to life. This is extension in City CRM that Johnson County uses heavily. It's called Contact Layout Editor. It means that for their staff that are within the system and have restricted permissions, they see a specific display of that contact record depending on who that contact record is. And so for a childcare licensing or a childcare licensed organization versus a corrections department volunteer, you're going to care about different things when you go to those contact records. So that information that's most relevant per contact type should be surfaced at the top. And so that's what the Contact Layout Editor brings to the table. It's for you to give control over what and how that information displays. They also have a partner portal, which is a relatively straightforward thing of just, this is for internal purposes only, which is a good reminder about Drupal sites. They don't have to just be public serving. You can also use it, because it's a content management system, to hold content that only your department needs to have. And so it's a good use of one site to serve multiple purposes. There's a few other slides, but looking at our time, I want to leave time for questions. The key takeaway being that in this use case, they have a unified platform for content, contact, financial, event, communication, and reporting management. So, any questions?
For like, how would it handle, this is like an actual event that happened a couple years ago, if you wanted to have the first, say, 2,000 people to sign up for something get a confirmation PDF or something, then the next people get a reasonable error message without breaking the system. Can it sort of handle that, and how much do you need to just rely on your server being able to scale up if like 100,000 people show up? You never had more than 5,000 people.
Yeah. So to restate the question for the recording about how to handle putting within maximums of event registration and how the event configuration and also the system can handle a load to the website during event registration and also shutting down registration at a certain point. So one of the fields within the city event configuration is a max registrant. So you set that. It's not required, but you can set that amount, and then you also determine what happens after that. Is it closed? Are people added to a wait list? How big is that wait list? And then there's also specific communication that goes out related to waitlist management and the ability to open up slots when someone cancels a registration. And so there's built-in functionality in the event configuration side for that management. Now to the other part of your question about what happens when you have people flooding a website in order to get that ticket right in time, that is an infrastructure side question. So how are you scaling up and managing the additional visits? So that's something that we have to work on a lot at Square, because we have, mostly working with nonprofits. They have campaigns, there are special events, and traffic goes up and down. And so the way to support any system that can scale when you know what your traffic is, 80% of the time could be significantly higher because of specific planned initiatives that you're managing internally.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for more of like a small scale one, that was what DC had that problem where they would, when they were trying to give people over 75 the first COVID vaccines, their site just broke like 6 or something, because that happened repeatedly, and like there would be like front page articles complaining they still couldn't fix it, like for weeks. But so I don't know if the marketplace for like small organizations is still like this, but when I was doing freelance stuff, like almost always the question of what service you would use would have at some point it would come down to maybe not the decision on using it, but the question would always come up, well, how does the contribution, like percentage cut takeaway compared to like, if it's like a political place like ActBlue or PayPal usually had the best rates at the time, and almost always like the service didn't actually provide anything that would be better than just linking to PayPal. Like they have something that wasn't like terrible, but like you'd be like, is this better than linking to PayPal? And the answer would almost always be not really, other than you're not using PayPal, you might not want to use PayPal. Like that was the only benefit would be that people might not want to use that service. They almost never like provided any service I ever saw, you know, compared to PayPal, but in a positive way that anyone would want to invest in paying you to actually set up.
Yeah, so CiviCRM works with a bunch of different payment processors, so Stripe, PayPal, Authorize.net, IATS, others. The key thing for why there wouldn't just be a form that is set up more directly with the payment processors, that you want to have that data about the contribution. You want to know who that was. You want to run reports, potentially segment, target because of it's an event registration fee of a certain amount or of a certain type of event. And so that's what the CRM brings to the table. If you just need to collect money and you don't need to care as much about the reporting or segmentation, then a CRM can be overkill. But for even small organizations, there's a lot of value in that, and especially value in having that data for the future. So that's why there's that flexibility in the system to work with any number. We work with organizations that intentionally will have multiple enabled because maybe their C6 side with advocacy different than their C3, and kind of different entities in a sense under the same umbrella, and it's important financially to keep that separate, but they can leverage the one system to manage and collect all of that contact data. So I don't know if that speaks to kind of the questions about PayPal or in particular, or more the value use of what you get back. I mean, it's free, like Drupal's free, right? CiviCRM, of course, is going to have things that come with it like any software will, but there's no licensing fee for CiviCRM. There's considerations related to hosting and security, as there should be anytime you're storing the kinds of data that the CRM holds. And the same thing applies for the kinds of data that most Drupal sites hold too.
Just as an added thing, you can integrate Civi with the PayPal where you just pay at PayPal and then store the information in Civi so then your fees will be the same. So,
Yeah.
And the benefit of that would be you could see like your contribution data in Civi with membership events and everything, which you can't really do.
And wallet integration, similarly, of kind of processing with like your wallet with different payment processors that have that, like Stripe, I think has that enabled. So Apple Pay and things like that, but still recording that contribution within CiviCRM. Yeah.
So this is a very highly specialized question based upon my own. We use CiviCRM, so
Okay.
how much experience do you have using CiviCase? And you can talk about maybe the difference between the standard CiviCase and have you used the CompuCore like CiviCase extension?
So I don't have experience using the Civi CompuCore extension. We have used CiviCase a lot and in really robust use cases. So we built out the system for the network of the National Library of Medicine that uses CiviCase for all of their grant management, because what a case brings to the table can be cross-applied to what it means to manage grant submissions and reporting and having a cascading list of actions. That is one of the more complex components of CiviCRM to work through logic-wise, and then like any more complex things to sort of change that architecture after the fact when there's data, and it is a trickier component, but I think one of the especially powerful things within CiviCRM, and what we have leveraged with it is more having a lot of the actual end user experience be built in Drupal, so using views heavily, web forms heavily, and all of that updating a case, but even some of that reporting UI, doing a little bit more on Drupal. SearchKit and Form Builder in CiviCRM are relatively new features and functionality that are still definitely under development and in constant improving. We've been challenging ourselves to try to use them more, but knowing Drupal so well and having CiviCRM entity so established with what it can do in Drupal sites, and it's still like, we'll just build a view. But for case management, but yeah, specifically with the CompuCore extension, I don't have experience with that works. How has that worked for your organization?
So, and I don't know if City Cases had, the reason I chose it at the time was because it just was seemed much more visually appealing at the time that I was trying to adopt it as a platform. It's been very complicated because it's, they have their own agenda, the people who are developing that, and they're constantly adding new functionality to it, which if you stick with them, you can't get out of it. For instance, I don't know if this has been fixed, but at one point you couldn't deploy Civi Case without also having Civi Contribute turned on, even if you didn't need Civi Contribute, because they had like a built-in dependency hard-coded into like, it feels like it's not a good idea, but it looks so much, at least the last time I
It
checked,
looks nicer. It looks so much nicer. Yeah, that's a big critique of with Civi Serum. I'm on the community council, like a quasi-governance body that supports the Civi Serum community, and that has been a long thing of Civi Serum forms. The native forms just like looking really ugly, but the engine being there. But like, there's so many pretty shiny products that like it makes that a hard.
For us, it was more like the dashboard of cases. Like, I think there wasn't even really like the City CompuCore has like this really nice like listing of cases that's like Ajax driven with Angular or whatever. And there wasn't even good landing page in the normal Civi case that would just like list all the cases that I could find. And finding all the reporting has been really not intuitive at all. So that's been the challenge. So I guess one follow-up question is, what's a good way to get to like either to self-educate or to find training? Because I haven't been able to find any training.
Yeah, trainings, the availability of training online, I think specifically for Civi Case and when you already have a really established thing that you know where you are dissatisfied and how to make there. I think there's absolutely a gap there. We can connect afterwards as far as what options are.
I've been attending your guys the Civi CRM entity.
Oh, excellent, with Mark.
Yes, and I think I missed the most recent one, but I'm trying to attend those to try and get a sense of how to actually, because I may just have to circumvent everything just to split everything. Those.
Which, I will be critical of my team when like we're not using native functionality in Civi CRM, or what does this mean for future upgrades, or what happens if Drupal changes significantly, or if Civi changes significantly and that's years down the road, or just knowing what the supporting a lot of organizations that had very complex Drupal 7 systems with Civi CRM with a lot of Drupal 7 views, Civi CRM data, that's a lot of rebuilding. And so it's very motivating on that development side to try to use the functionality that each system brings to the table. But the fact that that integration does exist and Drupal has a very different upgrade cycle moving forward, which is great for that kind of development. But it's a teeter-totter that I deeply understand with like thinking about how to solve the needs. My model for how I want us to always work is even just understanding what does 80% look like or 85% look like for being like good enough. I think sometimes we can get away from ourselves when we try to go for the perfect, which is like hard and much more expensive, and that takes a lot more hours or something. And especially since we work with so many nonprofit organizations, from a budget standpoint, that has to be more what matters. And so Civi CRM is this funny thing where it doesn't have the same sort of R&D budget or kind of thing behind it that is pushing forward significantly. We've been experimenting with even what can an integration with some sort of prompt look like to have reports built in a different way, because it's not like we're necessarily born with better tech skills. And when I think about how well organizations we support are even leveraging what already exists in the system, and that could be the same with Drupal, there's a lot more that can always be done, and just the time of the day to actually even know what's possible to meet needs takes time and practice and messing up and then learning from that. So documentation is just always out of date, like tomorrow. Or I was talking with someone yesterday about documentation related to user roles and permissions, the best documentation is always going to be the user role screen. The permission screen is always up to date. Now maybe setting up, but well, I know we're a little over, but if there's any other questions.
Just if you
Yeah.
have like it's actually not completely hypothetical, like sort of a thin like content type, which is just keep track of members,
Mhm.
not a lot, like 7 or 8 fields. Converting that from a CSV file, which like this created via CSV is like data source and you just feeds and you have members. If you wanted to convert that, creating like you still would have the CSV file into like the actual city member type would be pretty straightforward.
Yeah, setting up the membership types, the terms. Is it fixed? Is it rolling? Is it 3 months? Is it lifetime? Are there any inherited relationships by like I'm an employee of, and so I get these benefits?
It's like name, membership level, date, and active or lapsed.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah, so it would be like a 2-step process where that membership type would be configured, and then all of those members would just be imported in, and the contact record would be created, and their corresponding membership record would be created, and that can be done in kind of one swoop for how there's the UI tools for what I think of like the TurboTax, like 1, 2, 3, here's your spreadsheet guided process, and then there's a bunch that can be brought to the table to do more related to data migration. And then if you want to have a content type on the Drupal side and you want to reference a specific field in CiviCRM, that's possible too. So that's another thing that the CiviCRM entity brings to the table. So for events, for certain kinds of events that organizations will have, maybe they have online registration, and in that case they actually want to use Civi, and then they just reference the event ID, start typing in, they select from that event in CiviCRM, and then that can populate additional information. For others events that are just information only, they don't want to go through the process of even having those managed in CiviCRM, that's fine. Drupal can manage that information, so you can have a hybrid, and the same thing can apply for memberships or any kind of thing that your system is managing of what you are pulling from which side of the system.
We have 2 classes of members. One's like a special donation, one's like a regular donation. And they're going to the data we get it from is going to be integrated into a CRM process. And just we talked to them about it, and like they won't say it's bad, but definitely like the technical how that's going to happen is like just a black hole. It's just like right now it's CSV files that they've updated with the scripted process that's very old, but it works.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're like, we still need the data, especially data for the people who get more money. And so they're like, yeah, we know. And we're like, okay, but like technically what's going to happen next is just, it's like, okay, we'll get back to it.
Yeah. I don't think the technology, at least for that, is the challenging part. It sounds like more getting to decision, like the human side of software development that can slow things
Where you
down.
might actually say would be if they do get back to us and just sort of say, oh, we're going to keep your data source just coming because we don't want to actually directly integrate it, which is not supposed to. That's not what they want to do, but like conceivably they might just be like, no, keep it, and like just keep your CSV file.
Which is a valid option. I mean, we work with some organizations that they do collect money, but they intentionally don't actually collect that through CiviCRM, and then they manually have a standing process on a monthly basis that they bring that into the system. And so, even if something is possible, doesn't mean that it has to be done that way, or there can be all kinds of business and strategic reasons why data structure and processes are set up the way they are. Which is kind of going back to Johnson County, that's sort of the original impetus of having actually a bunch of spreadsheets and where registration was happening and having that at least live all in one place, and then over time consolidating just a little bit more. Well, thanks for everybody for coming.